going stupid again, missing a chance to fix a problem without spending a lot of money. A new battle, just what we need, of course, is blowing up in Washington over financial regulatory reform. We went to Capitol Hill, and Republican Senator Judge Gregg went on the record. I guess, Senator, we should admit that it doesn't get any more beautiful than out here on Capitol Hill.
Isn't it spectacular? It's just a beautiful scene, beautiful weather, and the Capitol looks fabulous. You know, I mean, it really does look fabulous.
It is sort of fun. All right, well, I'm going to talk to you about Goldman Sachs, and they are being charged civilly by the SEC. And your reflection on it is that do you think the other party's using it as a mechanism to get this financial regulatory bill through?
Well, I think it's unfortunate, and you know, the timing isn't good, in my opinion, because it's an anecdotal event. It does not really have a whole lot to do with financial restructuring. The financial restructuring should be proceeding on a bipartisan path. There is agreement here in the Senate between a number of us on the major issues such as resolution authority, derivatives, how you protect consumers, how you reorganize the regulatory agencies. There's basically agreement, but we've got all this hyperbole going on right now, and this event clearly energizes even more hyperbole, and that's not constructive to good legislating.
Well, explain to me the one aspect of it. I know that 41 senators, Republican senators, signed a letter saying that the current Senate bill that you're opposed to it. One aspect of it is this consumer agency. Are you for a consumer agency of some sort?
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what I think is odd about it. Because I actually did a little research, and at least some of the consumer advocates who are critical of Democratic Senator Dodd on it say that they think he doesn't go far enough in it because they say that they don't want it to fall under the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve had failed to use its power in that area in the years before the financial meltdown. And so the first thought I have is, why in the world are we looking to create a new consumer agency? Why don't we just get the people to do the job who hold the position, because at least somebody does currently have the power to do this?
Well, you're absolutely right. That's the correct way to do it, and that's why the suggestion that came from our side of the aisle was that you raise the level of responsibility and visibility within the regulatory agencies on consumer responsibility. You've got safety and soundness as the primary purpose of the Federal Reserve, the OCC, and the other agencies which control banking regulation. That's their primary purpose. You raise consumer protection to the same level as safety and soundness, and you merge them because they're really intertwined, quite honestly. Whether or not you have a good consumer protection has a big effect on safety and soundness of the banking community, especially smaller banks. So you basically put in the regulatory agencies the responsibility at an equal level in both areas, safety, soundness, and consumers.
Don't we already have that, but it's just that people dropped the ball leading to the financial meltdown? I mean, didn't somebody within our huge government structure, within the federal banking system, someplace, somewhere, or this SEC, have the oversight and the power to have taken steps to avoid what has ultimately been the financial meltdown?
Well, yes.
So somebody dropped the ball.
Yes.
So why not review where the ball was dropped and fix that area rather than creating a new agency and spending an enormous amount of money? Why, at least see if that works?
Well, I think that's what we should do. But as a very practical political question, what are we going to do and what can we do that makes the most sense? And that's why the suggestion was made by our side of the aisle, and it was actually agreed to at one point by the other side of the aisle, that the Federal Reserve, which has primary responsibility for regulation in this area, set up within the Federal Reserve a consumer department agency which has the same visibility levels as the regulatory people, and thus you reduce the bureaucracy in the sense that you're not creating a separate agency which has independent autocratic powers, which would be a big mistake.
Do Democrats agree with that, or they oppose that? They want to go outside the Federal Reserve.
Well, different Democrats have different positions, but basically Senator Dodd at one time was in agreement with that approach. The president and his people have never been in agreement with that approach. They've always wanted an independent agency, independent of the bank regulatory regime. I think that's a mistake because let me tell you why. If you set up an independent agency, they don't have any responsibility for safety and soundness, and basically they may push out the requirement to loan money to people who really can't afford to pay it back as part of their, whatever it is, their social justice purposes as a regulatory agency. And when you separate those two, you undermine the banking industry, and as you undermine the banking industry, you weaken the ability to get credit for people on Main Street. So we want to combine the two, and we put them both in the Fed. You could do it the way you're suggesting,
Just
which
have
is
people do their jobs.
have people do their jobs. But you know that doesn't work here in Washington. When we see a problem, something else has to occur to make it look like we're resolving the problem effectively.
But that's extraordinary. We have such an enormous deficit and debt, and yet if we've got already within our government structure a mechanism by which the meltdown could have been avoided, presumably if we actually got people who could do their jobs, it could be avoided in the future.
You're making far too much sense to be sitting here in Washington, Greta. This is not a Washington thing. But as a very practical matter, the goal here should be the same, which is to make sure that consumers get the same attention as safety and soundness from the bank regulators.
Except one costs more.
Well, yeah, I don't support an independent agency, so I mean, you know, I'm not going to defend that as an approach.
Now, Goldman Sachs, and this may be something you don't have a particular interest in either way, has been charged civilly. Why is there not a criminal investigation instead of a civil? Why do they get a civil investigation?
I don't know the answer to the question. I'm not enough of an expert in that area to have any idea what the decision of the SEC was in this area.
Are there other objections to the financial regulatory bill that you could, with the Democratic Party, that perhaps you could work together on and reach a consensus?
Yeah, let me give you 4.
Okay.
Number 1, resolution authority. Basically saying we're going to put an end to too big to fail, so that no company in this country, financial specifically, has taxpayers backing it up. Very important to do that because the marketplace does not work efficiently if the marketplace thinks the taxpayers are going to come in and back up a company when it gets in trouble. When a company gets into trouble, it should basically have to be resolved. In other words, put out of business. Stockholders lose their money. Unsecured bondholders lose their money. I think we can reach agreement on that.
All right, well, let me ask you about Goldman Sachs then. They got bailed out, right?
Well, they didn't ask to. I don't think in Goldman's case they were looking to be bailed out. I think.
Well, they took it, right?
They were told to. I mean, if you're going to go back and do some history here, what happened was I was there at the time.
They took.
Hank Paulson called in the top 10 banks and said, "You're all going to take this money because if those of you who are in real trouble take the money, it's going to be a message to the marketplace that you guys are in trouble and the other people are stronger, and therefore that's going to turn the playing field against you and you're going to get in worse trouble." So he essentially said, everybody, all the top 10 banks, you've got all the top 10 financial houses, you have to take this money. So there were 4 or 5 of them who didn't want to take it, Wells Fargo, Goldman, a number of others, but ended up having to take it.
So I shouldn't think, so I'm wrong to think like they got a bailout from the taxpayers and then they turn around and pay big bonuses. I shouldn't,
well,
I'm wrong in being sort of like hypercritical of them.
Yeah, on the Goldman case, I think it's hard to say that. You could certainly make that case with Bank of America, with Merrill, because of the Merrill deal, with Citibank, and with a couple of others that were clearly got support when they were in difficult straits and then gave large bonuses.
All right, I cut you off on the other objections you have to the financial regulatory.
Well, we have almost an agreement on derivatives. Derivatives are a huge issue, very complex issue. Senator Reid, Jack Reid from Rhode Island, and I have been working for about 6 months now to try to come up with language to address this. We think we basically have agreement. We have pretty much agreement on the consumer side, or we did at one point, how to structure this, put it in the Fed, make it an agency within the Fed with the same status as the people who are responsible for safety and soundness. And thirdly, we had pretty much agreement on how we were going to reorder the regulatory structure so that people couldn't go out, institutions couldn't go out and shop for the weakest regulator, which is what is happening. They were arbitraging regulators. So we do have a lot of areas of agreement here, and really when you look at this issue, it is not a partisan issue. This issue can be resolved because there really aren't a lot of partisan fights here. It's basically getting it right, and the 2 tests of getting it right are this. 1, make sure that as well as we can do, we end systemic risk, so that doesn't happen again. And number 2, make sure America remains the best place in the world to create capital and get credit, because that's what drives entrepreneurship and creates jobs.
Senator, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greta.